I'm a Rave. It's on all year, every year.
So Ravens flock, we are witnessing one of the biggest cover-ups in the history of sports. It's happening before our very eyes right now, and many people don't even seem like they're paying that much attention to it. They called us conspiracy theorists a few years ago. They called us Ravens fans homers and delusional a few years ago. But now we are getting more insight over the past week that confirms that what we said a few years ago was correct.
They called me a madman. And what I predicted came to pass.
To talk about this last week, but unfortunately I made a move and I had trouble reestablishing my internet connection. Like, I was running into issues with that on my computer, but that's been resolved. But to get back to this story here, I'm sure you guys have seen Pablo Torre and Mike Florio dropped a bombshell essentially. So there's been a document that leaked, and it's confirming that there was collusion going on. Both the NFL owners as well as the NFLPA were trying to suppress this information, suppress this document so it doesn't get released to the public for two different reasons. Of course, we could get into that later in the video, but we got to go back to what was the origin point of this story. So it all starts with Deshaun Watson in 2020. We know what happened. The Texans traded DeAndre Hopkins, not Deshaun Watson. I think I said DeAndre Hopkins earlier, but the Texans traded DeAndre Hopkins. The following season, the Texans lose a lot of games. Deshaun Watson, he put up good individual stats, at least good stats on paper, but they are losing. He wants out now. Even though he signed a new contract, he wants out. He requested a trade, he wanted out, and a bidding war commenced. See, many people keep forgetting about this. They keep trying to single out the Browns as if the Browns were the only team trying to make a move for this guy, when at the time it was like 4 or 5 different teams. It was the Browns, the Falcons, the Dolphins, the Panthers, and I believe maybe even the Saints. There was like several teams going into a literal bidding war for this guy, and obviously we know what happened. The Browns offered him the most guaranteed money. They weren't the only team to offer him crazy guaranteed money. I can't remember if it was the Falcons or the Panthers, but one of these other teams offered him $190 million guaranteed, and he was gonna go with that deal allegedly. But it just so happens the Browns went up to another level and just offered him $230 fully guaranteed. And of course, when that happened, many owners were frustrated by that. They were not okay with that. And then that's when, apparently, due to this document, we now know that shortly after that, we saw the NFL MC, which stands for the NFL Management Council, they come into the mix, and they present a 45-minute presentation to the owners, basically telling them to not to continue this trend of giving out these massive contracts that are fully guaranteed to quarterbacks, because they don't want to set that as the new standard, even though these players should get their money, but they don't want them to get their money. And Mike Florio also brought up a good point when he said that you could argue the existence of the NFL MC itself is proof of collusion, because ultimately these 32 NFL teams, in theory, they're supposed to be their own separate businesses. There really should not be a scenario where they're all meeting up specifically to get instructions, to take orders from the NFL MC. Now they try to frame it as if there's plausible deniability and as if the NFL MC is merely just making suggestions, but these obviously aren't suggestions. These are orders that they're putting in place that they want the owners to follow. And the owners, of course, wanted to follow through on those instructions. This is when you see Steve Bisciotti, shortly after the Deshaun Watson contract, starts to complain publicly in an interview saying, hey, this type of deal, like, it's not okay, like, this is insane. But just because it happened doesn't mean we have to accept it. And he specifically used the term we, which again I find very interesting, because again, in theory, these are supposed to be 32 separate businesses. However, they operate as one unit, which further goes into the fact that they did in fact participate in collusion against not just Lamar Jackson. There was multiple players. Like the three main players that they brought up were Lamar, Kyler Murray, and Russell Wilson. But also another fact that was mentioned in this uncovered document that Pablo had mentioned is the fact that there was reportedly like 594 players that were mentioned. So you're talking about hundreds of players and billions of dollars at stake here. We all know what happened when it comes to the Lamar Ravens contract negotiations. Lamar wanted what he wanted, which another thing about this document uncovering that was interesting is that this does confirm that Lamar was also trying to get a fully guaranteed deal, because that was the rumor. But to me, I kept saying, well, if there's no real proof, because Lamar himself has never publicly come out to say that that's what he wanted, we shouldn't just take the words of the Ravens media team leaking certain things out. However, this does confirm, because there was apparently a text message exchange between Lamar and Eric DeCosta where Lamar specifically says that he is going to continue to request a fully guaranteed contract. And as we all saw, when the Ravens were not trying to give him that contract, they began a smear campaign where they used the media as puppets to push narratives against Lamar to make him look selfish and irresponsible and injury prone, like he couldn't be durable, like so he's not worth the money. Just any argument that can make it look like giving him that type of money would be a bad idea. And also another thing that you saw that made it obvious to most of us that it was collusion was when you saw multiple teams come out back to back to back right after Lamar announced that he wanted a trade. They came out back to back to back to say, oh, we are not interested. We're not interested. Oh, we're not interested either. We're not interested either. And when you had many Ravens fans like you and myself, we said that doesn't seem like a coincidence. That seems completely ridiculous. There's collusion going on here. You had many fans of other teams say that we were crazy, say that this was a conspiracy theory, this is crazy conspiracy theories, and we had no idea what we were talking about. They said that we're overestimating Lamar's value, and clearly these teams don't see him the way that we see him, which is utterly ridiculous, because this guy is literally the one of two unanimous MVPs in NFL history. So clearly everybody already knew how good he was, but many regular civilians were trying to justify this odd pattern. I mean, this odd series of events of teams coming out to say we don't want to pursue him, which not only was it obviously meant to humiliate Lamar, but more specifically, it was clearly meant to make an example to other NFL players who were looking for fully guaranteed deals, that these owners are willing to band together to sabotage these players and suppress their real value. And despite all of these people that were calling us crazy for saying that there's collusion, to me what's laughable is it should have been obvious that there was collusion, because you're looking at it like the owners who were saying they didn't want Lamar and the fan base is saying they didn't want him. You look at the quarterbacks that they had playing for them at that time, and it's laughable. Like the Falcons literally had Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke as their quarterbacks at that time. And you're saying without a shadow of a doubt you're not interested in Lamar Jackson. And people were really trying to justify that. And like Arthur Blank even went out of his way to say, hey, we don't know if that play style is going to last. Ladies and gentlemen, Desmond Ridder is not in the NFL anymore. You know what doesn't last? Bad players who don't sell tickets. And Desmond Ridder was who they had at that time, who fits that description of somebody who wouldn't actually last. I don't even remember who the quarterbacks for the other teams were, really, like the Raiders and the Saints and all these people. Like, it doesn't even matter because, again, none of these teams have found a solution at quarterback since. But still interesting. You've seen Pablo do a follow-up episode where he invited Dominique, oh, forgot his name. Oh, Dominique Foxworth, as well as David Sampson, who was a former president of the baseball team, the Marlins. Obviously, Dominique Foxworth was one of the heads of the NFLPA at one point. And they were going deeper into this topic. As you would imagine, the guy, David Sampson, he was trying to justify everything that happened by basically saying these players agreed to it and that's their fault, essentially. But I still feel like that's clearly a flawed argument. At the end of the day, you're putting them in a spot where they don't have any choice but to go along with what's happening, and that's not. I mean, some people would say they're not under duress, but I disagree. I think there's an element of coercion involved in that sort of dynamic, but it is what it is. I thought it was very, very interesting to see how quickly this story kind of came and went, because it's only been 1 week and I mean, nobody really is talking about it anymore. And you would think that this time of the year, when the news cycle is slow within the world of sports, you would think that this would be a major saga that would be covered daily. But coincidentally, none of these sports channels, as well as none of these major sports podcasts are even touching this conversation for the most part. They're just kind of letting it get swept under the rug. And I think that speaks volumes to the power that many of these owners have, and the NFLPA, because it's not just the owners that wanted to suppress this information, but also the NFLPA, because guys like JC Treader, even though he was supposed to be representing the NFLPA, the more you dive into this story, the more you see that he was more so worried about just setting himself up to get a powerful job as an executive once his career was over, which it was about to be over in the near future. And they even essentially brought in a new guy with a shady past to make him just basically a puppet, to give JC a job that's adjacent to executive for the time being until he could take over his spot. Which there's a deep rabbit hole tied to this whole story, but it still goes deeper and deeper into collusion, because there's even evidence shown in these documents saying that the owner for the Chargers and the Cardinals, they were texting each other at one point, congratulating each other for not signing one quarterback, being Kyler Murray, to a fully guaranteed deal, and saying, hey, thanks, that can really help me make sure that I don't have to sign Justin Herbert to a massive fully guaranteed deal. And again, that's clearly collusion. Like, these are supposed to be 32 separate businesses, but yet they're behind the scenes, they're texting each other saying thank you for, and what you're doing is helping me do this. And like, it is what it is. Let me know, do you think anything's gonna come from this, or do you think that this will be something that people forget about within another week?